Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the World Travel Markets Aviation Sessions. This is number 2 of 2, and I think a long-awaited session, and hopefully one you're going to enjoy today. I'm John Strickland from JLS Consulting, and we have a very interesting guest to speak to. He's not a stranger to the world travel market. He's been here many times before. He was here 2 years ago in the interview seat when he was riding on the crest of a wave in Aer Lingus. Now today he's here in his new capacity as Chief Executive of Malaysia Airlines, which of course has been going through a very great number of challenges in recent years. And the gentleman sitting in the seat here has not been a stranger to challenges in his career. Perhaps this is the toughest one he's taken, so it's going to be very interesting to learn what his perspectives are on the airline for which he is now boss. So let's welcome to the stage Christoph Mueller, Chief Executive of Malaysian Airlines. Welcome again, Christoph. Good to see you here again.
Thank you, John.
As I said, 2 years ago when you were here, we were waxing lyrical about Aer Lingus, which was already doing well. And of course, we've seen big changes with that company in the last year. Since you left, the airline's now part of the IAG family. What is your reflection on that for a moment before we move to current business? I guess it's something you were actively involved in prior to your decision to leave, and then you watched it reach completion.
Yeah, well, the bid came in, I recall, shortly before Christmas, and in fact it didn't come as a surprise, from a general view at that point in time that it was IAG, yes. But we have always said the European landscape needs consolidation. You recall we were just coming out of that takeover bid from Ryanair, which was rightfully, I believe, prohibited by the consumer agency in the United Kingdom and also the European Commission. But what IAG is about to do and has done with Welling, with Iberia and now with Aer Lingus is, I believe, what everybody predicted. What's new is that the new mergers or acquisitions in the airline business keep the brands of the airlines intact. And I believe that was not only important for the other shareholders like the Irish government and the traveling Irish public, but it's important also for the employees of that airline. And I believe in retrospective, of course I've been disconnected since I left in February, this is one of the deals which has only produced winners on the shareholder side, on the consumer side and on the employee side. And so I wish them well, and I believe they have just announced that they continue the path we initiated a couple of years ago, extremely strong growth on the North Atlantic to leverage the geographical position of Dublin. I suppose they've opened 3 new destinations in 2016, and that is really complementing Heathrow because particularly the UK hinterland is better served via Dublin due to the well-known slot shortage here in Heathrow.
No, absolutely. Well, it's a testament to your time there that it was in such good shape when that deal went through. But you face challenges in Aer Lingus. If you read about yourself in the press, they talk about you as a troubleshooter and the difficult times that many companies had, and you were parachuted in to solve the problems. I think I remember meeting you once. It was announced that you were leaving Aer Lingus, but it wasn't announced where you were going. And I think I was asking you if you were going to just relax for a while, either in Ireland or on some Mediterranean beach. So what led to you, I mean, this is like a job interview question, Christoph, what led to you considering and then taking this post at Malaysian Airlines, which is altogether in a very different place to Aer Lingus?
It's not a new question to me. No, in fact, yes, I resigned in July of last year with the intention to take a sabbatical. That's correct. And then shortly after I was approached whether I would consider that. My answer has been at the time that they need someone fast, almost instantaneously, and I had committed myself to see my succession through. And that was earmarked to be May 2015, so almost a year ahead. No, but they made very, very clear that they wanted to work with me, and the process took a couple of months, and they finally came together and announced it then in December.
You must have gone through a certain amount of soul-searching about this as something you've worked for numerous companies, largely in a a European or European cultural background, but did that part of the equation, being in a completely different culture, cause a great deal of reflection?
It has never been an emotional question for me, like soul searching or that kind of thing. I believe there is a proper process where you try to do an outside-in due diligence, and there are 15, 16 questions you have to ask yourself. The most important is maybe what are the sources of the losses, and you can, in today's internet age, quite research a lot from outside. So I came to the conclusion that from a strategic evaluation, the job can be done. But as important, I believe, is to assess what the true mandate is and who is giving you the mandate, and whether all stakeholders are prepared to contribute to the solution. And also here I came to the conclusion that Khazanah, the Sovereign Wealth Fund of Malaysia, was absolutely and is absolutely dedicated to see that through. That's different to many other turnaround cases I know, where there is a wobbly type of stakeholder commitment. You know, nobody's clear, is there a cash call needed, will the company be delisted, all these type of things. That was all very, very clear. And also I believe the employees left the impression with me that they are absolutely aware that the sense of urgency was sufficiently developed at the point in time to ask them for contributions. And today we haven't had any work stoppage, even though I think that was the largest ever headcount reduction Malaysian industry has seen. We reduced our headcount from 20,000 to a little bit more than 13,000. That's quite tough. And at the same time, we lowered the salaries by 18 to 20%. So these are all contributions. Finally, not that the taxpayer has to pay the equity, but in my preliminary assessment, all these boxes were ticked, so the job is doable. So I went for it.
Okay. Well, you've been there 6 months, and just to put it in context, obviously last year was, I guess, the worst year in Malaysian Airlines history, with not one but two tragic air crashes. One which we know clearly now was an act of terrorism, the other one which is still an open topic. I don't want to dwell on that today, it's a sad tragedy, but the company, as well as its customers, were already really, you could say, winded by that. The staff was shocked. Customers, particularly in certain countries, were equally lost in their feelings of grief about what had happened. So it's a particular challenge against the economic or the numerical considerations to join the company. But the company was already in bad shape, notwithstanding those elements. They simply added salt to the wounds. It had lost money for several years and faced an increasingly competitive environment. Are you still really convinced this is not one challenging company too far, that the damage is not too great to actually achieve a turnaround?
Well, as I said before, you have to analyze first the sources of losses, and I think the three predominant reasons why this airline was losing so much money, and that started as early as 2012, is number one, the strategy, in particular the network design, is 15 years old and had focused on traffic streams which are less relevant to us today than they were in 2001 when the network was designed, predominantly the kangaroo traffic, right? That all went to the Middle East carriers. They have been growing more than tenfold in the same period. And at the time we ordered our 380s, they were carrying less passengers together than we do today as a single company. Today it's 120 million altogether. So network strategy, we have addressed that already. The second reason why we are facing a pretty throat-cutting competition in Asia Pacific, people have ordered too many aircraft. The order books consolidated exceed true demand forecasts by the factor of 2. and that drives prices down. It's heaven for consumers, but it's a nightmare for airlines. That is reason number two. And the most important one, I believe, still is our cost position. An airline is like an Irish lawn. It grows every day, and if you have to cut it every day, and that job hasn't been done, so we have to make good for many, many years of I would say, lack of cost consciousness. And only if you have a cost position which is competitive, you can price competitive, and then you have a good go even at the low-cost carriers, because if we are finished with the job, our cost position will be most probably amongst the lowest in Asia. So these are the three reasons which brought us into the losses. You are absolutely right. The two tragedies of 2014 was the straw breaking the camel's back. And that is particularly pronounced in two of our important markets. It's in Australia and in China, where the repetition of the mystery about 370, of course, is flaring up every once in a while with every press release from the Australian Navy and so on and so forth. Can it be overcome? Yes, I believe so, because we have had 6 hull losses in the last 2 years globally, of significance, I would say. And all other carriers are carrying on with life, even though you have seen Korea Air, as it was known before, they became Korean. The other carrier was ValueJet, I believe, in the United States. So we have seen the same pattern where there remains some unclarified facts of such an incident that it remains depression on your demand. And as I said, that's particularly pronounced in certain markets. In other markets, we haven't seen anything. Obviously some people are very agnostic about it, some others are not.
And coming back on what you said about the network and maybe linking that in with fleet, I think it's fair to say that not only was the network in many places loss-making, but also suffered from quite a complicated fleet, many different aircraft types and subsets of fleets. When you talked about the kangaroo traffic, just to be clear for the audience, I mean, we're talking about traffic from Europe to Australia, perhaps even particularly from the UK to Australia, where maybe some people perceive there are 2 airlines, BA and Qantas, but of course there are numerous airlines fighting on price for that kind of traffic. So it was an important area of business for you, but it wasn't doing anything of any value to you. You were losing money on it. So you had a combination of where you flew and the type of aircraft mix that you operated.
The aircraft mix, I would not see that as too problematic. We always started with a clean sheet of paper and designed a new network now with a new frequency pattern, with a new schedule and all that. And then we said, okay, what is the perfect aircraft type you put on it? And that coincided pretty much with what we had. So good news. Otherwise, we would have to shoulder a complete rollover that would come on top, but there is no necessity for that on a large scale. I would say less than 10% of our existing fleet. More important is that the kangaroo route, as I said before, is now predominantly in the Middle East carriers' hand, rightfully so, because their operating pattern in combining 2 long-haul sectors with 380s in some cases will bring the seat costs down so significantly that nobody else can compete. I know Irish people working in the mining business, they now commute to Perth in Australia because it's affordable. If you book early enough, you can get a return fare for less than €1,000 to Australia. You could just go back 10 years, that was 4,000. And that's the reason why prices on that sector are made in the Middle East. They are not made in Kuala Lumpur or in Singapore or in other places or in Sydney or in London. And you have to face the reality. You can't compete forever on that route, but you're going to lose a lot of money because we are flying a longer Great Circle distance. So we burn more fuel. So we have a built-in disadvantage with our geographical location to do that stuff.
And you mentioned the Gulf carriers, and of course we see even within that we have investment by Etihad in Virgin Australia. We have the big commercial partnership, which is certainly perhaps the most important element in this Europe-Australia market between Emirates and Qantas.
Yes.
There's a lot of discussion at the moment about the Gulf carriers, and I don't wish to make it a big topic of today, but what is your own view about the Gulf carriers? What I mean is we hear the American big three talking about unfair subsidy and lack of a level playing field. Do you see that the competition from these carriers, would you frame it in the same terms for Malaysian or differently?
That's a very difficult question, but I believe in the end of the day, of course, we are all subscribing to free trade, to open skies and all that, and of course that needs a level playing field. But let me go back when I was a little boy. My father was a global traveler, and his preferred airline, even though living in Germany, was Pan Am, because Pan Am would even bring you from Hamburg to Athens. So they enjoyed fifth freedom right all over the globe, and there would not be a single OND they wouldn't serve. So I believe the world at that point in time had accepted that a US carrier, for the benefit of his US shareholder, really profited from that liberty granted by whoever issued the fifth freedom right. My second touch point is when I joined the industry in 1988, the largest hub operation in Europe was done by Delta Airlines out of Frankfurt. They had 45 727s based there. And if you wanted to go to Prague or to Bucharest or to Moscow, you had to take an American carrier connecting two European countries, right? My third touch point is finally that we developed in Lufthansa Cargo the idea that the Middle East would be the perfect point to connect Asia with Europe. Just to take the globe and you know, take a string and you connect the points. The natural point of gravity, where two stage lengths are almost equal, is the Middle East. And Lufthansa Cargo was granted the fifth freedom rights from the United Arab Emirates to operate the so-called Sharjah hub, which is the blueprint for Emirates, for Etihad, and also for Qatar
Airways.
So I don't understand the entire discussion, because obviously times are changing, but you know, you can move the goalpost all over the world. What I'm saying is American shareholders have benefited over decades from the very liberal granting of traffic rights from the European side. European carriers have benefited from the granting of traffic rights from the United Arab Emirates. And I believe we should continue with that thing and not, you know, blow up the thing. Of course, there is an element of state building, but that I think is also legitimate. You know, Venice was built like that. You know, Venice was built by the Venice state, you know, not by private people.
So they are a key part of the competition landscape, but you've got competition coming from every quarter. I mean, even on, I suppose you could call a blue ribboned route like Kuala Lumpur, London, which you had to yourselves for a long time. BA came back into that market, I think it was this year. The Gulf carriers we've talked about. You've got your own neighbour within Malaysia, both locally and long haul, with AirAsia and AirAsia X. So we've got the low-cost breed of carrier, and surrounding carriers in the region, such as Cathay Pacific, such as your neighbour Singapore Airlines. Isn't that a phenomenal amount of challenge to have to deal with every day? Wouldn't even one lot, the Gulf carriers, as you mentioned, wouldn't that be enough?
If you're afraid of competition, then airline business is certainly not the right place to be. No, it's a little bit boring what's going on there in the prices. And you recall, just like 10 years ago maybe, the Asian carriers were really on the top of the benchmark with regard to returns and profits and so on and so forth. That picture has changed entirely. Now the US carriers are making a lot of money. I believe there's only one carrier left in the US not making profits, big profits, followed by Europe. Very prominent carriers this week, they upgraded their guidance. So all that is well, but give me a carrier in Asia Pacific making money these days.
Yeah, Singapore Airlines had their heyday, and now they are suffering too.
So it's basically nobody has learned anything from history. We had that situation after the deregulation in the United States. Capacity was poured into the market, very much to the liking of our consumers. But nobody made money. Frank Lorenzo invented the junk bonds, and you know the whole thing went down the drain. And 3 waves of Chapter 11s later, now let's say common sense comes home, Same in Europe, we have seen that pattern, and we still have loss-making carriers in Europe. And in Asia Pacific, I predict for the foreseeable future very, very small margins, just due to the fact that the order books exceed demand by the factor of 2.
So we talked about competition, we talked about network shape. Just another consideration on network shape. Would it be a fair comment to say that Malaysian Airlines network prior to arrival was shaped as much as anything by a wish to use the airline as a banner for the country? It would have to be seen in many places around the world because some routes had begun to be cut before you arrived. I think Los Angeles and possibly Frankfurt before you arrived. Yeah. You've cut some more and you wanted to reshape that network. Does that represent a recognition that it was run for, the network shape was politicized too much?
Surprisingly not. Right. Because I did very early, I think even before I joined, I did a very simple exercise. I listed the trade partners in descending order, the trade partners of Malaysia in descending order, and the frequency pattern of Malaysia Airlines. There is absolutely no correlation. The largest trade partner of Malaysia is the United States, right? Many, many places behind, 14 or 15, is the UK. Absolutely no significance in macroeconomical terms, right. But it's the route we provide most seats because it's related to other factors. At any given point in time, I believe in the UK is hosting 24,000 Malaysian students. So no, I believe that planting in a flag thing that didn't exist, does not exist. It's an emotional judgment because you know how it is. You know, people have relatives in the world. It's not like with Aer Lingus. You mentioned that example earlier. The frequency pattern and the destination choice of Aer Lingus correlates almost 90% with the strengths of the Irish diaspora. And that is very similar in Malaysia. A lot of people have houses in Melbourne, in Perth, and that's the reason why we fly there.
But in terms of political interference, it's been seen as a problem in the airline, even if it wasn't down to you must fly this route or don't fly the other one. I guess that's something that when you were offered a post, and in terms of negotiating terms, you must have demanded a completely free commercial remit to do what you felt was necessary for the airline to turn it around as you've been requested to do.
John, I mean, you see this 5-point program published by our shareholder Khazanah in August 2014. Khazanah, for the audience, Khazanah is the sovereign wealth fund of Malaysia. And it clearly states that this is a commercially driven exercise. So there is absolutely no political interference whatsoever, and should not be. But also, in all fairness, the Malaysian taxpayer has pulled up 6 billion ringgits to set up a new airline, right? It is legitimate. You know, that very shareholder, of course, would say, can we not jointly develop a new trade line? And so I think it's a give and a take. But at this point in time, we are purely commercially driven, and I think it came as a big surprise as I joined as a first non-Malaysian, as a German, and on my second day in the job I cancelled Frankfurt. So you see there is no political interference, neither from the management level.
You weren't just trying to have some vengeance on your own country in some obscure way.
So.
And you mentioned about costs. Inevitably, it's something which successful airline management today is utterly focused on the whole time. I was reading in an interview you've done recently that you said amongst the things you discovered there was a big overtime bill in the company, and that even one or more employees got a bicycle allowance.
That was one employee. I still couldn't find out who that was, but my predecessor was a triathlon guy. Maybe it was him. Right. I don't know.
Well, he had a little collection of different...
No, but we had 180 different allowances, and they had mushroomed over the years. And, you know, as I said before, cost-cutting is a job for every day. It's like working out. You cannot do that, you know, every 4 weeks a day. You have to do it, really with eager. And the good thing is we have so much upside potential, and we have discovered so many things which can be improved. It's a completely different situation if you run a loss-making airline, and that has all been done, and you run out of a story. So on the factor cost side, I already said we have lowered the cost per employee significantly. On the factor cost side, procurement is very high on our agenda. We have too many suppliers. We need to most probably reduce by the factor of 10, from 20,000 to approximately 2,000, 2,500, which enables then both sides really to negotiate volume rebates, but also processes, particularly IT-driven processes. They are really last generation, and our ambition is not only to cope now or to keep up with the current generation. We see the opportunity to leapfrog now into a next generation environment, and that is all very, very promising. I think we will embark from that as a very modern carrier.
And this, let's focus on costs, which, as you said, involves staff with 6,000 people departing. Reorganising, even at the grassroots level. I think I read, for example, important commercial areas like revenue management and network planning have been reorganised, and some existing staff, some have lost their posts, but others have got new opportunities where you've seen existing talent. Has that been quite a cultural shock for the airline? Was this a bit of a sleepy place over the years that people in the workforce knew there was a problem, but there was just never any appetite to do anything about it when it comes to the people side and the cost levels?
Certainly it came as a shock to some, but I think the vast majority of the employees I've spoken to, they were waiting for that. There is maybe one thing which went wrong a little bit, which is also a little bit inhuman. The shareholders said in August 2014, 6,000 people will lose their jobs, but we left them in the dark who that would be for 9 months. And people stop their private lives. They do not get married. They don't buy houses because the uncertainty who is, I'm part of the 6,000. So I believe it was also a certain relief for our employees because we are all grown-ups and we want to move on with our lives. And now we have a mixture of all different kinds of things. So we release people. We have a lot of vacancies where we have skill gaps to fill. So we have intake from externally. We want to rotate people. Just last week we posted 250 open positions within the company, and we exclusively posted them for internal applications, and we received 1,200. So basically more than 4 times oversubscribed. That tells me we have a very vibrant internal job market, and people like it. People like it, they want to take new challenges, and on top we promised them, and we have already delivered, to train them. That was certainly one of the downsides. People had stopped investing in people, and if you are in a technology-driven industry, and it starts, yourself, every day your computer wants to upgrade to some new version, and you don't want that, right? And you say, stop, I don't want an upgrade, but that's a new version of life. You need to be up to date with the latest Excel version, and we want to support that.
Important stuff. Coming back, I think we've got to come back again on competition. One particular competitor is AirAsia, which we mentioned already. And I think, if I remember rightly, a few years back, there was talk, in fact, I think it happened, there was going to be a cross-shareholding between AirAsia Group and Malaysia. And I think it went ahead to the extent of 25%, and then it seemed to very rapidly unravel. Where does the relationship sit competitively with AirAsia, led by Tony Fernandes, and would something like that ever come back again, the idea of the two companies working together?
Yeah, well, you asked me a question I didn't witness. I can just, repeat what really witnesses of that time tell me. Number one, it has left a lot of ruffled feathers amongst our staff. It was imposed. It was not, kind of a merger of equals or something of that nature. It was dominance. And I believe already from that angle, I would never recommend to try that again. We are competitors, full stop. Will it happen again? No. Part of the package is that we will have an aviation commission in Malaysia, because, I mean, to merge two dominant carriers in the domestic market will have very negative macroeconomical repercussions, because ticket prices will go up, pretty much for the same reason why the European Commission prohibited the merger between Ryanair and Aer Lingus. It is absolutely and exactly the same. But again, I'm not a witness in time, but I cannot see that happening again.
Okay. And in terms of partnerships that you may either have already or could do in the future, you're part of a One World Alliance. Is that something that is going to remain important to Malaysia? And will you also remain important to the One World Group?
Oh yeah, very much so. I believe it's not so long ago that we joined One World. First and foremost, our customers, they really love it. You know, all the benefits every consumer has from an alliance membership. For understandable reasons, nobody has done an awful lot between MH370 and today, or basically the day I joined on One World Partnership, but it's completely under leverage from our side. And I see a lot of potential for us and also for other One World partners to benefit more in deepening those relationships. We do not have any significant relationship with Qantas, with Cathay, with JAL, not even with British Airways. So there is a lot of more potential. Talking about partnerships in general, we have never questioned any partnership we have signed maybe 20 or 25 years ago. We are currently in the process of really mapping very clearly where a partner brings benefits. So basically where we have a network extension, and which partners might be even counterproductive to our bottom line. So we are currently going to kind of a weeding process on the downside, but also I've always been very pragmatic. If we discover an area in the world which is important to Malaysia, but we cannot service with our own metal, it's not covered by One World, I wouldn't be shy to explore whether we can fill that gap with another partnership.
Somebody else.
Yeah.
And again, just to touch quickly back on network and fleet, there's been a lot of talk, I think you've acknowledged yourself, about the A380. You said the fleet was actually pretty well aligned to your new network plans. Could you just quickly tell us what will be the new network focus and where does the A380 sit in that? I think I read you are saying you will divest of 2, at least, of I think the 6 that you've got.
We have a total of 6, and 4 of them, or basically including a flying reserve, we have 5 employed just on the London route. It's for us a perfect aircraft for this route. We are very dedicated to serve the UK market really with our prime product. It's the only route where we do offer first class, and I think it's really a super first class, and we will continue doing that. Our flight schedule is just perfect. We have a morning and an evening departure. So that will remain the same for the foreseeable future. You have been an airline planner yourself. We do not disclose our schedules 2 or 3 years out. We take that decision season by season. For the time being, that will remain unchanged. But that is also the aircraft with the range and freight capabilities we need for this market here in London. So leaves me with 1 surplus aircraft that is currently heavily employed, believe it or not, in charter business, because a lot of high density charter business, particularly we have a very, very, Malaysia as a country, we have a 5-star Hajj product, most probably the best in the world. I'm in that market for quite some time. It's flying regularly to Saudi Arabia, and amongst others is flying predominantly Spanish soccer teams around the globe. And so we do not have an aircraft sitting on the ground. That's all I have to say.
Fair enough. And you mentioned there about onboard service, with first class being on the 380. I wonder if that's exactly one of the areas where you have to now address attention, and I guess you're going to tell me that you are, which is in the quality of service on board, and particularly in the premium cabins, because it's where the best of the Asian carriers have scored in the past. And although first class is maybe a debatable point amongst many airlines today, some don't have it at all, or they only have it on certain routes. Certainly premium cabins, business class in particular, are very important as money makers. It's a crown which maybe Singapore Airlines has enjoyed a lot of kudos from in the past. Is that something you see as an opportunity? When people say, do you have a chance with Malaysian, is that surely it's got to be one of the best to get back into that arena?
As I said, the financial situation of the company was such that there was never a surplus in the last couple of years. So maybe it was a little bit a mistake to suppress the necessary investment in our product. And we fell behind in a lot of categories. We are acutely aware of that. And literally in the first couple of weeks, we launched the two projects with the longest lead time. We will equip our long-haul fleet with new lay-flat beds for the audience. Our new seat is on display here just at the end of the thing. It's a fantastic thing. I would rate it really as highly above the business class lay-flat average. I think it can even compete with certain first-class seats. So that is really what our customers enjoy. We have a lot of long-haul night flights. So really it's appreciated by the business traveler to have basically the four components. You can work, you can sleep, you can relax, and you can eat. So brings me to the catering concept. Malaysia is famous for food, and the Malaysian culture is all around food. You know, that's a big temptation for me.
Putting on weight?
To say my private. Well, I'm fighting again. But we have to really showcase that more, and we have also the diversity in the country. We have a lot of Chinese, we have a lot of Indians, so we can even cook not only Malaysian food, we can cook much more. And really to feature on flights to China and flights to the subcontinent, really the specific needs a little bit better. So catering is an element. We truly believe that Wi-Fi and other features, lounge, are incredibly important for the traveling public. So we will come a little bit from behind, but we have done it before, and I believe in the latest 18 months' time, our product in the front of the cabin, but also in the rear of the cabin, would look entirely different. So it's something completely new. And of course, what we have also to do is to work on the service delivery. Not only the hardware is important, but I think we have proven in the past with our Skytrax, medals, that our people are certainly not the shortcoming in that exercise.
And that aspect as well is where you're facing the challenge of what came out of last year, the two tragedies. It is about hearts and minds, isn't it? The staff have seen these incidents happen, they've seen large numbers of departures, but these are exactly the people you rely on to take the brand forward with their smiles, whether it's on the telephone or at the airport or on the plane.
Yeah, maybe the Malaysian people are maybe not so hard-nosed as others might be, and I found it very touching when I joined to still find a lot of employees who took these tragedies very personal, almost in tears. And, it's really, they feel with the next of kin, they feel with their fellow crew members, and that most probably has held back maybe a little bit the extra mile, but it comes from the heart, and it's a sad story, but at the bottom of it, I think it's a good sign because people have a human sensitivity which will enable them to deliver a very personalized service.
And also, leading on from that, you've talked about rebranding, and I think originally you had hoped to be making a big noise about that right here at the WTM. Where are you with that, and what should we expect? Because I've heard you talking about a name change, but I can't imagine what you would change it to, because notwithstanding what the tragedies, Malaysia surely says it all.
Yeah, so I will keep on doing that. I will keep that tension very high, and then you will invite me for years and years, and we talk about brand change. No, we are not yet there, because it would be a big mistake to just put another name on a fuselage or another logo without having the content changed. You know, let's recall, we are a new legal entity. We have a new operating certificate since the 1st of September. We have done something which has never been done before. We operated during the night of 31st August and 1st of September. Every aircraft was carrying 2 certificates with two number plates. Does exist, you know, it's in the cockpit on the rear wall. Our customers took off as customers of Oldco here in Heathrow, and they landed as customers of Newco. Our employees took off at old employees here. So we are really a new setup. We have a new management team, we have a new shareholder, and we will embark on a new product concept. So basically you asked the question, what is from the old company? Yes, the aircraft maybe, but that is not relevant. And if everything is new, I believe it's absolutely justified to also give it a new name. But that is basically the external rebranding, which might not be the most important thing. The internal rebranding is important. And
with the staff, you mean?
How you know how you feel. If you buy yourself a new suit and you put it on for the first time, it gives you a different feeling. And insofar, you know, our engineers, they want to work in T-shirts. If you have been in Malaysia, you know why. You know, that's a wonderful opportunity to push the reset button, and rebranding is not only name, it's really what we want to be from a product, and what we want to offer is a personalized and individualized travel solution from everybody, from a foreign worker coming from Bangladesh to a first-class passengers traveling to Heathrow. And that's what we are working on, and once that is finished, maybe not implemented fully, but conceptualized, then you invite me again, we talk about brand.
I look forward to it. And in that top team that you mentioned, the people you're putting around yourself to look at the different functional areas, tell us a bit about that, because I saw a couple of familiar names, actually, ironically, 2 people. I think we were on a panel here last year. I think you have Paul Simmons, ex-Flybe, and Peter Bellew, ex-Ryanair, interestingly enough. Yeah. Tell us a bit about the structuring of this new team.
Yeah, team building is, of course, a little bit similar to soccer. It's not only that you can buy together the best players in the world and expect to win, you know, the league. It's about whether you have the right players for the problems at hand and whether they work together as a team. As I said, you know, attributable to the fact that so little has been invested in the people in Malaysia Airlines, we were unfortunately forced to source more on the top level from outside than I would have wished. But I think we have now a nice balance of non-Malaysians and Malaysians. Peter Bellew from Ryanair, as I said, has already landed a couple of quick wins with regard to punctuality and so on and so forth, so we work through the thing. But the whole management team has one common goal. We want to recruit the next generation of leadership in, let's say, 3 years' time, entirely from internal. I think it's doable. You can become an MBA in 3 years, so you can also become an airline manager. So a lot of our efforts is going in training, and as I said, it's a lot of fun. Sometimes it's a little bit frustrating because you find so many things, but I always turn it around and say what looks like a problem is in fact an upside potential, and that is how we start every day.
And when you talk about that future succession planning, that includes your successor. I read that you know, part of the logic of bringing you in as an outsider, both outside of the company and outside culturally, is that you will groom ultimately, I know we're a bit premature in talking about it, but at some point there will be a Malaysian successor to you.
I would hope so. I would hope so, yes. And that is part of the job we are doing. It would be stupid to focus on one name, but I learned that many, many years ago, normally in a proper succession planning in every company, you would have a panel of 3 successors, one who can take over relatively short term, one maybe in 2 years, and one a little bit later, that you have always a pipeline. That is what we are currently doing. And but I have to say, we found incredible talent in the company, and you know, you cannot expect soccer players to train themselves. That concept has never worked. You always need a coach, yeah, and that is a little bit the situation. We have wonderful players, but now we need really a plan how to act on the pitch, and we have first quick wins. It's very promising.
So you see yourself a little bit in the guise of Alex Ferguson, perhaps, in the airline world.
I never understood what he said, but...
Let's go to the floor, Christoph. I'm
yes.
sure there's some questions for you out here. So would anybody like to ask Christoph a question? If you would, just stick your hand up. We'll get a microphone to you. Yeah, gentleman on the front. We'll just whiz a microphone, and then gentleman on the third row. If you could just introduce yourself to us, please.
Peter Gordon, Transport Economist magazine. You're part of One World, and you've got airlines from One World flying on routes like London, British Airways, and Hong Kong. What are the issues where you have two carriers from one alliance flying on the same route? Are there problems from the regulators if you cooperate, and if you don't cooperate, are there pressures within the alliance? I mean, I know that Qantas and Cathay, for instance, don't get on that well at times.
I think that is the most common feature, in fact, that basically both airlines fly on the route. You take Lufthansa and United, Chicago and Frankfurt is served by both carriers, and I can give you hundreds of examples where this is the case. So then you have the first thing where you still operate totally independent with independent pricing because you do not have antitrust immunity. So the next step in getting closer is you file for antitrust immunity so that you can harmonize your pricing, and that I believe has been obtained by most carriers on the North Atlantic in the meantime. The next step is my prediction is that more trunk routes in the world between two hubs will be operated in joint ventures. That we see already happening in A++ on the North Atlantic. That's the Star Alliance joint venture, but One World has a similar feature. So we don't have any of that. So we are really in the foothills, and if you want to take that British Airways route, we operate as two independent carriers, and we take the benefit at the end of the route in British Airways distributing our passengers to beyond points, and we do the same with theirs. So that is the status quo. We have not filed for any antitrust immunity yet.
Next question.
Switch it on. Oh, there you go. Peter Duncan, I'm glad you mentioned coaching because I work as an executive coach. My background is aviation, but I've also worked a lot across other sectors, and getting involved in crises is something that's not unique to aviation. We've seen some major high-profile companies in the last few years, BP, Royal Bank of Scotland, Tesco, recently TalkTalk, VW, all having these major crises. And what normally happens is the incumbent CEO leaves the organization and a turnaround CEO is brought in. And what I wanted to ask is, do you think that a CEO in a transformation situation needs very different qualities from CEOs in, let's say, regular situations, running companies in normal circumstances? Do you think you need to be a different breed?
Yes.
And in what way?
In 4 or 5 different ways. The difference between change and turnaround management has a couple of things. Number one, the sense of urgency. The need for speed in a turnaround situation is basically part of the survival. So you need to make decisions under uncertainty. 80-20 rule. You cannot call in a lot of consultants, to come up with what everybody likes. You have to take decisions which might be not so favorable perceived by others. The next thing, the leadership style is more autocratic in a turnaround, where it's more consensus-driven in a normal change management process. You cannot consult a lot with your team. So I think there are a lot of different things. Let me compare that with someone, if you have a surgery to be undertaken with your knee and you book an appointment with your hospital, the whole team gets prepared over weeks and you come early and all that thing is done in a very planned and fashionable measure, as opposed to someone being delivered to the emergency room from an accident. Maybe exactly the same operation has to be undertaken, but it has to go like that. Yeah, without preparation, you have to judge the situation just on the spot and do it. But since you are the specialist, I hope I gave the right answer.
Do you have more questions for Christoph on the floor? Okay. Christoph, just more widely, obviously I mentioned about Malaysian acting in some ways as a vehicle of the state, but airlines generally, whatever their ownership, are important to countries these days, both economically, you gave a ranking of trading partners, but in terms of tourism, and thinking we're here at the World Travel Market, how will that role evolve? Because again, to get tourists into Malaysia to experience its beauty, or as you were saying, its multicultural food offer, you've got to have a powerful airline and play as an airline on the identity of the country.
Yeah, I'm very grateful for that question. No, in fact, we have, due to the fact that we focus too much on transfer passengers in the last 15 years, we have neglected a little bit local traffic to and from Malaysia, and that is basically where our competency lies. We are the expert bringing people to and from Malaysia and also connecting them in Malaysia. And you wonder how to improve that situation. And for me, the answer is very clearly, people do not travel because there is a cheap airline seat available. That might happen in domestic, if you have relatives living in, but long-haul people don't tend to choose a destination according to the prices of the air travel. So what we intend to do, and that's the reason why you see us here today jointly with the Malaysian Tourism Board on the booth, is our promotion for the years to come is to promote the reason why to travel, and that is Malaysia. Malaysia is totally punching below its weight when it comes to inbound tourism. If you see what we have to offer in comparison to our neighbors, it's a multitude of what they have to do. So we will promote Malaysia, and that also requires that we will have to change our relationships with the trade. We have been acting as a normal legacy line carrier and so on and so forth, but I believe we have to develop also our skills to talk to tour operators, to cater more for their needs, that they need a commitment more than a year in advance, and they need a price commitment more than a year in advance, and they need the features of revenue management in order to have name changes in the group business guaranteed. So I believe we need to overhaul our entire sales and distribution system in order to be better in tourism. We have made some quick wins. We just announced last week that we will operate 160 charter flights from China into Sabah in East Malaysia, Kota Kinabalu, next year. So there is a huge wave of inbound tourism, maybe also triggered a little bit by the weak ringgit, but China, Australia, of course the UK, very important to us because we have ecotourism, we have all these things which are currently very high here on the priority list. That will be developed, so we will change in that respect pretty radically, I would say, over the next couple of months.
And weighed against those positive things as far as tourism is concerned, you mentioned one of the headwinds in some respects of the status of the currency. On the other hand, fuel prices at the moment are low. What about economic headwinds generally? Are they holding back some of the early progress?
I'm blessed with a European or US American background where, we are glad if the whole piece here grows with 1% or 1.5%. Malaysians seem to declare to declare a catastrophe if GDP is down from 5.5 to 5, right? I still have to cope with that. But to live in an economy where not only the economy is growing, compound annual growth at 5.5% since 50 years, right? But also 50, yeah. But also where the population is growing so fast that, you know, every day you have more customers coming online and on stream, and they are very demanding. The per capita income of Malaysia is the second highest in the region after Singapore, so it will be a very, very solvent middle class there. From that perspective, I mean, I still dream 4.5% GDP. It's a long time since I had that, so I'm not complaining, and I see Malaysia really steaming forward with relatively low labor costs. Our labor costs are below Chinese labor costs, whereas the per capita income is double. So that is really the breeding ground for success.
Sounds positive. Anyone else? Yeah, another question. Just, where's the microphone gone? It's coming down.
Hi, it's Robert Wall with the Wall Street Journal. Christoph, you talked about the competitive landscape in Asia, and I'm wondering, really two parts. What do you see as a catalyst to start getting a shakeout there? And if it doesn't happen, can Malaysian ever really become profitable, or is the best you can hope for break even and survival?
The competitive landscape is such, I give you a couple of numbers because I'm researching that, of course, every day. Malaysia and Indonesia in combination have an order book of 942 aircraft. 942. China, with a population more than 10 times larger, has an order book of 462. So half, right? So if I just see the travel propensity, I still arrive, because we have correlations between airline demand and GDP as high as 97%, because there is no other modal split. You know, you cannot drive with a car to Kota Kinabalu, right? There is not such a thing. There are very little train lines. So what I have calculated is, if you just want to finance your order book with 25% equity, that means nothing is left for a dividend. Everything goes to the bank, right? Malaysia and Indonesia together have to pull up $17 billion funding just for the 25%, right? I ask you, Robert, can the stock markets in Kuala Lumpur, in Jakarta, pull that up? I doubt that very much. So what I see is consolidation is going to happen. The world knows 3 different scenarios for consolidation in the airline business. The first one is hub consolidation. We saw that in the United States, coming from 10 carriers ending up with 4, or 3 if you wish. And then, you know, Memphis is closed, St. Louis is closed, Cincinnati is closed, and all that. You know, that is basically where the win-win situation is created. The carrier operates larger aircraft, seat costs go down, consumer prices go down, everybody is happy. Is that going to happen in Asia Pacific? Are the Indonesians saying, you know, the Malaysians are very nice people, we close Jakarta and do the whole stuff via Kuala Lumpur? I doubt that this will happen during my lifetime. Or with Singapore. So excluded. Domestic consolidation, we just talked about that. Asia merging with us, you know, or Asia merging with Lion Air in Indonesia. I don't see that neither. So the third known form of consolidation is what I call involuntary consolidation. You know, we had more than 3,000 airline bankruptcies after the Second World War. The fertility rate of a young airline is 1 to 4. Only 1 out of 4 airlines created survives for longer than 10 years, right? No, something will happen there. There will be blood on the floor. Can we be profitable? Yes, because our cost position will be very, very competitive, and our value proposition with regard to our geographical hub location, our service proposition, with our partner network, nobody can pull that up just, you know, overnight. I believe we are really in a good position to become profitable, and as I said before, the shareholder anyhow really wants to bring us to a fitness level which allows them to sell us in a couple of years' time and to refloat it at the capital market.
Well, Christoph, time is nearly catching us up. So just one last question in the context of what you said there, hub consolidation. For your own aspirations to develop as an airline, do you have enough capacity at your Kuala Lumpur hub? Or what is the status in terms of Malaysia airports, Bahad, in providing your capacity?
That is most probably our sharpest strategic differentiator if I'm taking now a 10, 15, 20-year look forward. Because analyze us as opposed to our neighbors, KLIA has 3 runways. They all have a lateral separation from a mile, so they can be operated entirely independently from a departure control aspect point of view. We currently have 65 movements with 3 runways. Gatwick has 55 movements with 1 runway. So we operate, roughly at a third of our capabilities, whereas Singapore, next step is to get wet feet. Hong Kong is the same. Jakarta, no space at all. Thailand still has that golf course between the runways. No, I believe really looking forward, we are the only place where you can grow frequencies as opposed to aircraft size. And that, as I said before, is really a differentiator for the business class traveler. So in that respect, the airports in Malaysia are tip-top, even if you go to the countryside. Very, very nice. It's a good example for the UK.
Great. Well, we'll see what happens here in the coming few weeks, I think.
Yes, I think we are.
Christoph, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. I just want to round off by making one observation I think you've just shown us today. I read in an interview with you in your previous life at Aer Lingus, you said to an Irish journalist, I believe the company pays me to think, not to answer emails. And I think the way you've been reeling off this data about trade partners, airport capacity, order books, shows you've been doing quite a bit of thinking already about implementing and actioning as well. So thanks very much for your precious time today, Christoph. It's been very interesting. We wish you good luck, and we will invite you back for further progress. Thanks a lot. Christoph Mueller,
Thanks, John.
Chief Executive, Malaysian Airlines.
Thanks, John.
Thanks a lot. Good.